So what are your thoughts on the Attorney General's annual vehicle stops report?
Well, it's something that I think is needed, the racial profiling, but it does not tell the whole story. And so, from law enforcement officers' perspective, you're looking at time of day or time of night that you're making the stop, the area as far as is there a lot of criminal activity there? Are we targeting that area? So the example that we always use is Fairway Meadows. If we're working a saturation of the Lake of the Woods area, kind of targeting the Fairway Meadows, it's a lower socioeconomic neighborhood, which is predominantly black. We have targets there that we know are involved in criminal activity. It might be through our tie with the ATF task force or information that we're sharing with the City of Columbia back and forth. But we might target an area where we know we're looking for certain people or certain vehicles. That's not racial profiling, that's criminal profiling. And that's what the citizens of this community are expecting us to do, is take the criminals off the street. And so there's no question that all of us, the three of us in this room, everybody that's going to read this article or see this article, we all have biases, and that's just part of being a human being. With the racial profiling, the traffic stop numbers, I can monitor that throughout the year, and so I can look at how many blacks is this deputy stopping, and then from that, I will look at what areas that is that deputy working in. So the best example that I can give to you for a rural community like ours, if we have a deputy that is assigned to our upper north district, and that would be Harrisburg, Sturgeon, Centralia area, their stops of blacks is going to be lower because they're working an area that's predominantly white. Harrisburg doesn't have a lot of African Americans that are living there. Sturgeon, again, same thing. Or if you're traveling Route F out in the rural part of Boone County, if you make a traffic stop, it's most likely going to be a white person that's driving that vehicle. So area is a big thing. So if you have a deputy that is assigned to what we call our C2 district, which would be Gregory Heights, it would be the Lake of the Woods area, some of the areas that have our problematic neighborhoods, and those problematic neighborhoods are lower socioeconomic. They have more blacks predominantly. And so if you're working those areas, that deputy is probably going to stop more blacks than what the deputy is up north. I think everybody would agree to that. I mean, that's just simple demographics of the different areas. And so, I look for not only racial profiling, but I'm looking, do we have a deputy that's stopping too many females? Because we've never had that problem, but potentially it could be a problem if you had a law enforcement officer that was targeting young college-age girls. So I'm looking at the full gamut of area, location, their assignment. Was it, did we do a couple saturations that month, or was it all normal patrol stops? Time of day, is another big thing. Our numbers of black stops jumped significantly from 9 o'clock to 4 in the morning. So what's the key point of that time of day? Dark. So how can you tell if you're stopping a white or a black during that time? Now, with a bias, could you say that it's a Cadillac and it's probably being driven by, so you'll have some of that, but you're targeting the equipment violation, or you're running the plate because of the equipment violation, and a warrant comes back. And so the keys to all of that are equipment violations cost money to fix them, right? You got a tail light out, costs money to fix it if you can't do it yourself. If you don't register your vehicle, because that costs money with DOR. All of those things are equipment and or moving violations that are violations of state statute that our deputies are employed to enforce. And so, because again, lower socioeconomic, they don't have the money to pay to get the headlight fixed, the tail light fixed, whatever the case, license the vehicle, those vehicles are going to be traffic stopped, and predominantly those are, again, lower socioeconomic and often or even predominantly African Americans that are driving those vehicles. Then if you get a ticket for that equipment violation, you're then going to have to go to court, or you're going to have to pay your fine. Again, money comes back into the picture, and they don't pay that. The court then issues a warrant for their arrest. Our deputies run the plate. Obviously, there's a warrant come back, traffic stop, subject's under arrest. And so one of the confusing things, like if someone looks at search numbers, it's pretty close, 48 to 50% of our searches of black individuals is incident to arrest, because that's my policy, that anybody that we're going to put into the patrol car, we're going to pat down and search to make sure they don't have weapons before we put them in the car, and then obviously before we bring them to jail. So that's kind of a misconception, that we're just out stopping blacks and searching their cars and doing all of that. A lot of the search numbers that you'll see on the racial profiling are just simply search incident to arrest. But that's what that search is, that we're searching their person and doing a quick inventory to make sure that they're not going to lose property. But the misconception, I think, from a lot of people is that we're just stopping blacks to search their vehicles. So, those are probably, the key points for me that I look at. And so like this is the 2015 printout. So I can get this monthly, and then I'll just go through and I look at the percentages. And as I said, time of day, time of night. So is it a second shift or a third shift deputy that's making the car stops compared to a day shift? So I'm looking at that. The number of stops, high or low. I even look at, are we stopping too many cars in the city of Columbia versus the county? Because even though we're responsible for everything in Boone County, the deputies, predominantly, I want them working out in the county as much as I can, because those are the citizens that they're employed to serve. And so there's just a variety of things that I look at, but I think it comes back, or I hope it comes back, to the expectations of the leadership that is being provided to the law enforcement officers. And so I can tell you that we haven't changed a thing since Ferguson or any other incident that you want, because we believe that we're doing it the right way, and we're doing what the taxpayers are wanting us to do. So we really haven't changed anything that we're doing.
So you mentioned implicit bias. Do you guys have any training, or have you instilled any training over the last few years?
Well,
tries to deal with stuff like that?
Yeah, we do cultural diversity. We've done all that kind of training before. Obviously it's mandated now, so we've done that stuff before. But I think it's important for people to know that it's not just law enforcement. We all have biases as human beings.
Have you ever seen like red flags when you look at the racial profiling reports of your deputies or anything?
Not with racial profiling. I've seen red flags with, like I said, I'll have a deputy that's stopping way too many cars in the city, and I know that they're not doing so. Those types of red flags, but nothing on the racial profiling. And so, but I'm just saying, when I use that example, that's an argument that people could make, is that, well, if you're looking at, if it's a Cadillac and it's got a rims or whatever you just said, they're probably gonna take a look at it. Sure. I think that especially if they're working that area. The thing that a lot of people also don't understand is that oftentimes we know what the bad guys are driving. So, and I've said this before, and I haven't been down, so I don't know, but in 2014, and I think you were around during that, when the ATF came into town and we made the big roundup arrest. There were like 25 or so people that.
I remember that.
So, you have the names on a whiteboard. We know who they are. We know their associates. We know what they drive. And so that's the information that is relayed to the patrol deputies through the task force, through the drug unit. And so they're going to target that Cadillac with those rims because they know this person drives it, or they know that the driver of that vehicle is an associate of someone that we're looking for that could be in the vehicle. So there's a lot of things that go into it that is more what I always call criminal profiling versus racial profiling, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, when you look at 2015 report, disparity index for Boone County Sheriff's Department for black drivers, a little over 3. Arrest rate 14.8, where compared to whites is 6.6, and then search rates higher as well. I know you do have a much higher population of white people compared to black people, and that can kind of skew the numbers a little bit, I think. Anything aside from what you've said that you would say to like a layperson or something that comes in and asks you to explain those numbers? Because when you look at the numbers, obviously people who don't work in law enforcement or know anything about law enforcement,
Right.
jumps out at them, and they jump to conclusions. So I mean, is there any other way you would kind of characterize or explain those numbers to people?
Well, the problem that you have is, it's based on our population, so no one takes into account when, like, students just came back into town, right? All the people that work in Columbia that don't live in Columbia, Boone County, and all the people that are passing through on 63, I-70, two major thoroughfares. So there's a lot of people that are coming into our community that we're stopping that don't live in Columbia, Boone County. And so, that's one factor. Again, I'll touch on the time of day. So the majority of the white drivers that we stop are in the morning hours. And the reason for that is you'll have citizens that will complain that people are driving too fast during, our rush hour, which I know you're from Detroit, so it's a different rush hour here. But our rush hour here, so our traffic unit or an assigned deputy will go work St. Charles Road, or will work Creasy Springs, Scott Boulevard, the roads in the county that are around the fertile circle of Columbia. And so we stop a lot of people that are going to work. I'm not saying we're writing a bunch of tickets, but we're trying to show a presence because we've had a complaint or a number of complaints that cars are driving too fast in that area. And so we're not stopping a lot of black drivers during that time frame. When we look at our breakdown of our numbers, most of our stops are between 9 p.m. and 4 in the morning of the black. That's at least when it spikes. We're obviously stopping throughout the day. So then I always fall back on, and every law enforcement officer will, that, or law enforcement officer manager will fall back on the time of day. I mean, if I'm driving southbound on 63 and I'm a midnight cop, and there's a vehicle on the other side northbound, and I check it at 82 in a 65 or 82 in a 70, and I decide I'm going to stop it and I jump the median, there's no way that I can tell whether that's a white driver or a black driver. So some of those things, when this was brought into inception, I don't think were thought of completely by the legislators. So there's some flaws. Again, do I think it's needed? By all means. Do I think that there are law enforcement officers out there throughout the country that violate it? Sure. Do I think they're here at this department? No.
So do you think there's any other reason why there's those times a day where you're stopping more white or more black drivers?
Well, it's probably going to be because of the criminal profiling. So again, it's a good question. If we're having an area, say Fairway Meadows again, Lake of the Woods area, and we're having a lot of crime out there, say a string of shots fired or whatever, we're going to pull resources and we're going to go target that area. So we might work that for 3 or 4 days with our proactive unit and guys on overtime, and you're kind of piling up the number of traffic stops you're making because we're trying to address the criminal element and the problems that we're having in that area. Falls back to lower socioeconomic, predominantly African Americans live in the area. We're going to stop a high percentage of African Americans during that, say, 3 or 4 day detail. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know, is there anything else these numbers say to you, or things that jump out to you when you're reviewing them throughout the year, or when you see the annual report?
No, I mean, because again, at least, and I can only speak for the Boone County Sheriff's Department, I've never, in the 12 years that I've been sheriff, or almost 12, and of course been here almost 28, but in the 12 years, I've never had a formal complaint on any deputy for racial profiling.